and this one is kind of a little bit theoretical, I would say. Modern is a turn 3 format. Nothing that can win on turn 2 should be allowed to exist. Do we have something like this in Legacy?
I think it's wrong to put a label on it. I think it has more to do with mana cost. There's the old saying, if it costs 4 mana, it has to win you the game.
I want to build on that, what you said, a little bit. I think...
Welcome to In Response, a Legacy podcast. Whether you're a dedicated player or just curious about Legacy, join us as we share ideas, discuss decks, and have some fun along the way.
So guys, recently actually a lot of talk about Legacy started, what to ban and how does Legacy should look like. And so I came here actually with a question. How should Legacy look like?
That's kind of a hard question. I'm pretty sure that nobody really has, maybe they have some clues, but nobody really has a definitive answer for that. Am I right? Or do you see this differently?
Yeah, no. In general, I agree because I'm a person that thinks you should listen to what the creator of the game basically says in what kind of direction when we have some kind of discussion around that. You know, when we have bannings, we usually have justification why they are bannings, and they raise some arguments. And I think there are actually two ways, more or less, that they like to manage the game. And one is kind of community-driven. I think this is what we probably can focus a little bit more here. And the other one is just purely based on the data and the power level. And of course, both are connected somehow.
Yeah, one thing I also kind of wanted to get out of you is like, we're Legacy, we're still an evolving game within Magic the Gathering. It's not a closed cards pool like we have with pre-modern, for example. So what does it mean? Legacy should change, am I right?
Yeah, to some kind of extent, personally. I Legacy was sold to me as a very not slow-paced format, but slowly evolving format. A format where you can play your deck indefinitely, probably.
Yeah.
And yeah, surely it evolves over time. It gets new cards, but it's not that it's like you get one new card every each set.
Multiple ones.
Or God forbid, multiple ones. Back then in the days, it was like when a card made splashes in a set or in a how's it called? An extra set, like the commander sets were, and something like that.
Like True Name, for example.
Yeah, that was the perfect example right there. It was one card that made huge waves. It was like, well, have you seen this card? It's so insane. It has protection from your opponent.
Yeah.
And it has protection for everything, and you can't get rid of it. And the whole meta shifted just to accommodate this one single card.
Or Conspiracy, right? There was also some
Leo Vold, Conspiracy. It also changed your meta, but it was and what's also from Conspiracy was
Kaya?
No, not Kaya. The removal for one white, where you can rid of the
Council's Judgment.
Council's Judgment. It's
old one.
Yeah, it also shaped the meta. It was it was basically the beginning a little bit of this more faster paced evolving Legacy. Definitely not something that we have right now, because it's extremely fast nowadays. I would love to go back to this, to slowly evolving metagame, to something where I get maybe 1 or 2 cards a year, and they should have an impact. They should be like True Name Nemesis. They should be like Leo Vold or something. They, if they make huge waves, that's great. That's what I really love about the game. If it's in flux, but it's not like constantly evolving, constantly changing. I mean, I'm pretty sure we've seen this with Modern for the past 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. It's totally exhausting.
I agree with that stance for sure. I'm also one of the guys that says I liked the slower paced formats as well, because I think particularly we still have some evolvement even if there is no cards involved, like you have like challenges, some tournament results where some decks are performing well, and then people need to adjust for that, giving their sideboard choices and so on. I think this is actually, I mean, I personally enjoy this kind of meta gaming on that level quite a bit. That I ponder a little bit on what kind of sideboard cards I should pick. I enjoy that, but also on the other hand, I can see that people at some point, if the meta kind of is in a big way, in such case that a certain kind of deck is not playable, regardless of the rotation cycle of week by week, then of course it's frustrating for the people who, for example, like to play, I don't know, elves, Mardu, Storm, I don't know. Yeah. There are a lot of decks that are just really not the power level anymore, and this comes with this fast-paced cards that are added to that format as well. I would agree if that wasn't the case.
And in my opinion, one of the biggest culprits here is Commander. I know people love Commander, and everyone that listens to us is maybe that we are a little bit anti-Commander biased. But definitely Commander is one of the culprits, because Commander sets the incentive to make slower games, to make more battle cruiser-like, drop you a huge threat. It's not like the old days of Storm. Even I heard a lot about a lot of people talking about banning Fusser's Oracle out of Commander, because it's you win, and that just is a feel bad for the people. I mean, hell, when they're playing Legacy, we're used to this. I mean, what shall we do? We drop a turn 1 Emrakul into play.
But yeah, Phil, I think I want to stop you here before we get a little bit too far out of the way.
That's fine.
Because lastly, we talked about how should Legacy look like and not how should Commander look like. But yeah, with how should Legacy look like, we have the principle with, for example, with Vintage, where you have like a few pillars of the format. Yeah. And I think a huge thing to look at the format and say, hey, this is Legacy is, let's identify some pillars of the format. I mean, a few of them are pretty sure, and I think the first one is blue, and it's because one is
Brainstorm and Contact.
Exactly. Cantrip style decks. Then on the other hand, we have the Stompy variants, including
more red, Ancient Tomb things.
Ancient Tomb style.
Maybe even Chalice to some extent.
It's part of Stompy.
It's part of Stompy. Ancient Tomb is basically the fuel for those decks. But what are actually the other pillars in the format? Because some decks got invalidated. But what are some key factors for this is Legacy?
I think it's more on the decks particular, because if we talk general pillars of Legacy, that, let's say, do you want to know what existing or what should exist? Both in our but currently, of course, I would not just put all blue in one pile. I would divide them into the tempo, or like decks that want to, we have to define tempo, I guess, but that want to go under certain opponents and have some like timely based advantages. Then of course like Days and Wasteland, and there is the combo decks that also are to a big extent blue. For consistency reason, and then control decks. So all of those, of course, have blue, I guess, sometimes. But if we include blue as being the cantrip kind of decks, then these 3 pillars, and then we have Stompy, and then I guess we have all the other. Of course, we have kind of the Green Santini lands-based, or let's say Tudor-based decks as well, that don't play the cantrips, but have, what's the Saga, have Green Santini, have crop rotation, who can just get you what you need, because a Legacy ultimately is a format where you need to, as much as possible, overcome the general rules of Magic. You want to cheat as much as possible with the mana and with the consistency that you have in your deck. Ancient Tomb is a good example, or Lotus Petal, or Dark Ritual, and of course the cantrips, the tutors, the consistency is a big factor as well. That just is way better than if you have, let's say, a Commander deck in Legacy. a singleton of everything and no consistency at all.
Yeah, I really like the combination of archetype pillars that you mentioned with storm combo, with tempo control. With control, we saw a lot of shift how control looks like in Legacy over the last few years, which was a big disturbance for a lot of the Legacy community. Then with stomping, then the acceleration part in the land-based decks with Greens and Zenith, as you mentioned, is like Mox Diamond, also a big factor in those decks. Actually, so cheating on mana, creating consistency, as you're told. But I think we wanna move on after we identified which decks should be in Legacy. And this one is kind of a little bit theoretical, I would say, because in Modern often it's like, Modern is a turn 3 format. Nothing that can win on turn 2 should be allowed to exist. Do we have something like this in Legacy? I want to check with Philipp here.
I'm pretty sure we have something like this in Legacy, but it's not turn-based, because we have so many strong, until now we have so many strong answers. Thoughts of Will, Thoughts of Negation, Thoughts to Projects, or even all the hate pieces. They're incredibly strong. So I think it's wrong to put a label on it and call it, it shouldn't be more than a turn 2 format or something. I think it has more to do with mana cost. So therefore, there's the old saying that it has to, if it costs 4 mana, it has to win you the game. And although this is and pretty old heuristic, I think it still has its legs. I think it still holds its ground in today's Legacy metagame, and everything that invalidates that rule should probably be banned, because like Renesix validated the rule, Oko validated the rule, Lurus validated the rule. So there are most problematic cards were 3 mana. I mean, yeah, we had some outliers like Grief, but Grief basically hasn't cost any mana. So
that's not a 4 mana card,
yeah, that's true. So basically, if Case the Mind Sculptor costs 4, back in the day it has won you the game. Now Balustrade Spy costs 4 and wins you the game. So
yeah, sure.
Pretty sure.
There's for sure this kind of threshold for this game-winning cards with the 4 mana.
Tendrils of Agony.
Yeah, of course. Although it's hardly playable, I would say, at the current state of Legacy. I want to build on that, what you said a little bit. I think I would 100% agree if we would really kind of exclude the fire design a little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
And the reason is why we have the best answers. I agree completely. This is what is kind of the identity of Legacy. But in the old days, this is basically similar as pre-modern. The threats are shitty, but the answers and the enablers, everything is great. But of course, with fire design and new and modern Horizons cards being added, more and more just must answers threats are being printed that are getting cheaper and cheaper. And I think based on this, it shifts the direction a little bit more into, it's not also turn, let's say 3 format, whatever you want to call it. I also don't think you can call it like that. But if you don't interact, let's say if you don't impact the board on turns 1, 2, I think in the first 2 turns meaningfully, you are pretty much behind having a Legacy. This is how I would a little bit frame it. Turn 1 Temio, if you let it resolve, or if you get it sticking and it just connects once, it's already a 2-for-1, right?
Yeah.
It's not game winning, but even if it gets removed, but you're already a card ahead. And if you, this for example, why you see a deck like High Tide so problematic in the format. It does nothing until turn 3, for example. And in this, you cannot just have your opponent have a Temio, have a Bowmaster already on the battlefield, and then you just start playing the game. It's not something feasible on the general level, because the threats are so impactful and you need to start interacting heavily and answer everything or have your own threats. And that's also one reason why I think Control is struggling a lot.
Yeah, because the only thing that Control has going for at the moment is Beanstalk.
Yeah.
That's a turn 2 threat that you're mentioning.
Yes.
If Beanstalk sticks, then suddenly
That's of course
it's an uphill battle.
Yes. But
And
it's good.
But I think still with Beanstalk, it's okay because you're
Yeah.
still having to do something. Because even with a Beanstalk turn 2, you doesn't really commit anything to the board. You haven't played any answers if it's the first thing. But like, yeah, as you said, setuping for Control is a really, really big hindrance currently at the time. So yeah, no really specific win condition. We're just like mana is the constraint that we're looking for within Legacy, because like you can cheat with everything other than mana for win conditions. Even with Dark Rituals, you need 1 or 2 cards to cast the Tendrils of Agony if it's 4. So it's mostly consistency based, I would say.
Probably.
And with being like consistency based for wins, I kind of want to look into when something is a problem for the format. Because as we said, yeah, the Legacy should like this, but sometimes we have some problems. In the later years we had a lot of them, but when is something really a problem? And I've noted myself a few metrics that we can then elaborate on. And one is meta share, the sheer presence in the meta, the win percentage. With win percentage comes a little bit the winners metagame, like how does the top 8, top 16, top 32 look like in bigger tournaments, and then the time frame at the data to look into, especially in regards of MTG Goldfish, for example. So Daniel, Philipp, who just want to start a little?
What was the first thing?
Meta share.
Metashare. Metashare is, like we talked about it in the last episode, is kind of misleading because you never see the whole picture. And even if you get all the data from Modo, it's still skewed in a certain kind of direction. The direction is mostly how can I play the most games in the least amount of time.
And now I think a little bit further. You have complete access to every game of Magic in Legacy being played. What would be the problem? With having access to perfect data?
I think historically it's about, I think, probably 25 to 30%-ish. Maybe 1/3 of the meta. If 1/3 of the meta is just one deck, I'm pretty sure that there's a huge problem in the meta.
For you, Dana?
I would not give it a number per se. I think a lot of factors, like I would also look at how well the deck is then perceived of the format, I guess. If it's, I don't know. I think if we now look at the current Legacy metagame, a deck like Blue Black Tempo, I'm not 100% certain, but I would maybe argue that a majority of Legacy players are fine with that being the most prominent deck in the format. It's okay. You always have a game of Magic when you play against it, and even if it's 20 or 30%, it's okay. But of course, then it's still the question: is it somehow too strong? Sure, I agree. There's some point, but yeah. I would not give it like a distinct number because I don't know if there is always a threshold number that Wizards is looking for. I personally would not do it.
It's more, is it against the spirit of the format? Is it a good police deck in the format?
It's of course one indication if it's significantly or let's put it that way, if 30% is one deck and then we have 2 or 3 other decks who are 25%, and it's just a 3 or 4 deck format, can be okay, I guess.
If it might be, yeah.
Might be, yeah. So I think depends a little bit on the context.
But mostly when we have these kind of situations, it's more like you have one deck sitting at 25 to 30%, like you had with Blue-Red Delver in Expressive Iteration time. And then everything else is sub 5% or something like that.
Yeah.
Because simply nothing was good enough to beat it.
Exactly. This is
I mean, we didn't even had this extreme situation with Grief, with Scam. I think it was mostly 23% or something from the meta. And even that felt kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. I think for Legacy, my personal threshold would be like real statistics, not winners meta game, should be around like 20%. Which means like every fifth deck is this deck. And if you look at Legacy tournaments where guys and girls are slowly adapting, kind of insane. But so let's shift to the next one, since you didn't really had a share. Another number, win percent.
Yeah, win percentage I think is far more important, I would say, than popularity of a deck. Also, because it just dictates a little bit, if you look at different challenges, paper tournaments, how many of this particular deck you have that converts into top 8 or in the top finishes, and leads to, of course, just superior deck choice, then a better chance of winning. And yeah, I think something between 50 and 60% is healthy, almost, if you are a good pilot, if you can add your personal skill to it, like win rate.
Yeah.
Of course, it depends, and it should be hateable to a certain extent. But over 60 in the 70% area, I think it's a little bit too much.
I think 57 was actually the number that uses Wizards of the Coast to ban Breach back in the days. So 57% was,
for example,
of a lock for any deck. Like deck experts can guess like 75, 80% deck.
Exactly.
And this is okay, but the general heuristics for the deck should be like around 50 plus minus 5%, I would say.
Yeah, probably something like that. I mean, I really like the way Wizards is doing this by the 57, or I thought it was 55%, because they take this number across the board. So if a deck is popular and has a high win rate, even not so good players, let me phrase it that way, pick up the deck and really bring the win rate down. And so therefore I think the 55 really shows that the deck is inherently too strong.
Yeah.
And therefore I really like that approach when it gets banned. I think I don't know, I think Oops All Spells at the moment has something like 48.7% win rate or something like that. So in Wizards of the Coast measurements, we are pretty fine.
So let's look a little bit on the next one, which is a combination of meta share and win percentage a little bit. And this is winners meta game. And this is something that is really, really interesting to see from a public stance, because it's most out in the open. You have like the top 8 list for any given challenge or any given tournaments, and you see like there are 3 Oops players in there, or there are 3 Blue-Red Delver or Blue-Black Tempo players in there. And this is something that creates a lot of talk in the community. Is this something that you really should look into, or you personally look into?
Like what the community is?
No, what you are thinking in, like, okay, top 8 is 3 times this deck, or is it like, I'm just looking at meta share? Or is
Yeah, for one particular event, I'm not super high on looking anywhere close to, we have now 3 Oops or 3 Reanimator now, suddenly it's broken or so. No, I personally don't think so. Of course, if it's like several events, of course, 3, 4, 5, 6 events, I don't know, where this is the case, of course, then I think it's significant enough. If it's just one single event, I don't look at that personally.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure that's the right approach. So you also don't. You had a very good article back on your old website that was about result oriented thinking, and it's basically the article said that people are driven to this deck performed well, so it must be good. This deck has a 5-0, so it must be good.
Yeah.
And you totally omit a lot of the variables that maybe ran in the tournament. So matchup luck, or even mulliganing or something like that. There are so many factors that are that are here, and you have to factor all these in to really get a good view of the meta, a good view of the decks, and really to say something if something is too strong or not. Yeah.
So that's cultivates a little bit in the last stance here, and this is the time frame. And I think as we addressed, like in those three metrics, is like one particular event isn't enough.
Yeah.
One weekend isn't enough. You should look at more data, and this is the time frame. And I think this one is really, really important, because like if you go to Goldfish and put in like last 7 days, you get an answer. If you go on Goldfish and put in last 4 weeks, for example, or you go on MTG Top 8 where you can put in the last 3 months, for example, it all changes up. So is there like a particular time frame that you typically look into, especially when something can be a problem, or is it like completely free?
For me, it's actually kind of I mean,
that's a tough ass question, to be honest.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's like it has both. So it's kind of free, and it's also matters. So therefore, you have to, when you look at the data, you have to see the whole picture. You have to look at it. When is that time frame? If you're right out of bannings, then for sure control decks are worse, because the meta isn't settled. There are new decks emerging. There are new card choices everywhere. As a control deck, you have to know the meta in and out to react. And you can't do that in a new meta. So therefore, for sure, what's good in a new meta is tempo is good, or very proactive decks like Stompy is good, or combo decks that are proactive are great. And they paint really, especially in maybe the first 2 weeks for a fast evolving format, or even as long as 2 months for a slowly evolving format like Legacy. When you get the data, it's might be maybe for a particular time frame 2 weeks is enough, or 1 month isn't enough. So that will be my opinion here.
Yeah, I think I can agree. Also, I would when I look at this kind of decks, I also tend to not look, personally at least, not too much about the numbers in general, even not on the win rates and so on. I look more on the strategy of the deck, what kind of deck it is, how you could potentially hate it, and is it a deck that can still consistently win through a lot of hate. And then for me it strikes, okay, maybe it's too strong. I don't know, there's a good example was the Expressive Iteration card from Delva, because tempo is an archetype that usually it has the advantage of being faster on a short period of time, but after turn 4 or 5 you're kind of lacking material to still compete and put on the pressure, and then usually the opponent takes over. But with Expressive Iteration, it kind of defeats it, the weakness it had. And so it had all angles covered, and similar like Dredge, it can be phenomenal if there's no graveyard hate. It's the best deck probably, right? But of course, if everybody brings a lot of graveyard hate, you won't win any matches. And of course, then the question is, what cards are in those decks and what strategy does the deck have and how you can effectively address this without, also dedicating too much sideboard cards, deck specific ones, for example. So I think this is in that sense, for me, kind of the more giving factor of how strong a deck is.
It's more of a feeling, in my opinion, the vibe that you get off from the deck. If it's, might be.
And that's I think very actually something just to add to this, where I like Oops, for example, in the meta game. A lot of people don't like it.
I like it too.
And I personally think there are so little things you can interact with the deck that allows you, both from the perspective of the pilot of the deck and also when you play against it, if you make your choices very meaningful and think of some scenarios, you can, I think, have great puzzles that you can solve and actually win with, I would say, enjoyable magic.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. Nothing to add here.
But to come a little bit back, it's like a lot of things that revolve spending is like a little bit on the vibe. How is the counterplay? This is something that I think Wizards acknowledged at the beginning of this year or even last year, is like public stance matters, feelings against the deck also matters, even though win percentage, meta share and something, all of those accumulate to getting a card and the deck being banned from Legacy. So I think we covered when is something a problem really, really in depth. And Phil talked a little bit about our next topic already, which is like analysis after bannings. And as you said, like after the bannings, proactive decks thrive. Controlling aspects doesn't really matter because you don't know what you are fighting against. So it was a given that Oops was one of the better decks in Legacy at the time of the bannings.
And also what I want to really go the full loop here to the beginning, with Wizards of the Coast putting so many new card releases out. There's so many fluctuation in the metagame with new cards being spoiled and new cards being tried out. Control can't get a grip on the meta. It simply isn't possible. Every proactive deck will be better than Control if there is so much product.
Or like the sheer amount of different angles that decks provide. Of course, you can beat one singular deck, but of course, if you have 5 different strategies, because there is this card that is tried out, or the other one, that of course you have an issue with Control. You cannot exactly build your deck according to a known meta game. The Control players always, of course, like it when there's one deck to beat, kind of, which is not healthy, but then Control can really, you can see that in Paper Legacy, I think. If there is one really strong deck, which I think was in Scam, then suddenly we had 4-color Control and so on with Beans, very, very specifically built just to beat that deck and have like a couple of others covered, and they can perform well. But not in a...
The days are ended where we had the decision in Control like, okay, this seems like a spell snare format, or this seems a format to play Spell Pierce, for example, which are very, very specific card for sometimes of Flusterstorm. For example, you had the try of the one cost solutions for something, and you decided which.
I think Spell Snare was like played when we had Psychic Frog around. And Renin 6 was
Renin 6 era, but like one of I mean, it was the end of Dreaded Arcanist, whereas Spell Snare, because you could hit Renin 6 and Dreaded Arcanist. It was like insane. But I think after we talked about all of this, let's applicate like our definition for Legacy a little bit onto Oops, because like we said, like when something is a problem, or how should Legacy look like, we told like 4 is the mana cost, constriction is like a little bit of consistency. And shout out to Nathan Liepetz. He did a very big AMA on Reddit and on his Twitter account, and I've pulled in 2 crucial numbers, I think, for Oops all spells to talk a little bit about it. if Upsilon spells keep a 6 or a 7, mulligans once or not, they have 27% chance of a turn 1. And if they mulligan once or never, they have a 8% chance on a protected win on turn 1. Is this for you guys okay in the metagame or not?
Definitely. If you look back at the old days of Black Red Reanimator, I think it was probably around the same. It's not like, what are 8% protected? That's one pact of negation and the combo. You have 40% chance of having force plus blue card, and then you bought in some graveyard hate maybe as the second the second hate, and then suddenly it's over. 8% of a protected, it's totally fine.
Yeah, I think a protected turn 1 is not any concern to me personally when I look at this deck, because if I think about it, it at least involves like 3 cards, right? It's not
more. You can't mull as far as
4 cards, right?
4 cards.
4 cards you need for protected.
No, 5. For protection you need 5.
Yeah.
For because like you can't get up to 4 mana and cast a creature.
Yeah.
Otherwise.
So it's like land, dark ritual, another petal, whatever, then and the creature. It's like unprotected and then a pact for protected, for example, or how likely is that? Of course, everybody's all of those that is a 4 for 8 off for the creatures, but the combination of cards, it's not like a 2-card combo like Sneak can show. They also can have turn 1. I guess they might even be able to. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe not. If they are able to go for that turn 1.
They need a lot of 1 from force.
Yeah, makes sense. But yeah, this is not my concern, I think, because it happened. It also happened back in the days with Ad Nauseam Tendrils, for example. I played it myself and had lots of turn 1s. Also protected. And yeah, this is legacy to some extent. The issue is, and I'm not saying it is at the moment, but I think the issue is if you interact then still after sideboarding, and the deck then still consistently wins for all of the hate, then of course it's just too resilient, too great, and has too fast of a clock. But I think for Oops, it's not the case, personally. You can have meaningful interaction that buys you a turn, and like if you're playing a deck that doesn't put something on the table and just answers, yeah, of course you will win eventually. You will lose eventually. But if you have your Nethergoyf on the battlefield, your Bowmaster, Bowmaster is maybe not the best, but Tamio, for example, is also not so bad.
Tamio is pretty great in the match.
It's great, right? You also advance your winning position each turn if you have like one discard spell of your own. It doesn't win, but yeah, I think that maybe people are pissed, to put it that way, that there's not a single card, well there is actually, that shuts down the deck, and
they can jam it turn 0, and it's like, well, here's my Leyline of the Void, now you scoop. Wow.
Yeah. I think that's maybe because Leyline turn 0 doesn't
used to be that kind of a card.
Yeah. But it's not the case, and that I guess maybe this bothers people. I have no idea.
Yeah. Like the Leyline is not an auto win now. Depends really on the deck building that was put into Upsilon spells in the last 3 years, I would say. Kinda. When Oops really took off.
Sure, this MDFCs of course help the deck tremendously. There's no question about it. And
Thassa's Oracle for sure did its own pulling, because the win just got that much easier.
It's not like it got easier. You have less dead cards in a deck. You needed 2 more.
Yeah.
So out of Dread Return for Thassa's Oracle, you had back then Dread Return for Angel of Glory's Rise, which brought you Azami, Lady of Scrolls, and Laboratory Maniac. And then you tap them both, draw a card, and you won.
Yeah.
And that was, so you had basically 2 slots more, the Angel of Glory's Rise and the Azami.
And you could die to removal. yeah, so a lot changed for the deck. As you told, like 2 cards had been put out because like Phasasaurus is that much cleaner, can't die to removal anymore, the combo. So it just got more consistent. Is there something that you would say like this is unacceptable anymore, disregarding like sideboard choices against the deck, but more like if the deck has like 15% protected turn 1 wins, is it too much?
Not if I can hate it out. I think it's more on the resiliency side, I would say. There are glass cannon decks really that can just, I have it, but if they have interaction in a loose, this kind of things happen. I think
but protected does mean I have interaction. I still
of course. Then we're talking about the resiliency, which is at some points for sure too much. How often that is, of course, I don't want to see it every game.
But like once a match is
maybe also too much, actually. I think once a match is because like that. Once the match, for sure, I think too much is like 1/3.
Yeah,
probably that's probably too much.
That's much. Yeah. But I don't know if it happens in a tournament of 6 rounds. I don't know, once or twice. It's okay, I guess. Something like that.
And currently it often happens between once or twice.
Yeah, something like that. When I can recall it correctly on my run at Eternal Weekend, I think I hit maybe 3 to 4 protected turn 1s out of 11 rounds.
Yeah, I mean,
it's the average number. So this is how the deck is currently. I think and I think we 3 are on the same opinion here. The deck feels okay. It's in the spirit of Legacy. You kind of want to put everything together and have the best thing that you can do here. And yeah, this is kind of
also
what Legacy looks like.
Yeah, and also I think Legacy needs some kind of glass cannon deck. We need something like Black Red Reanimator in the meta in the game. I mean, it's totally boring to all the time play against only blue.
Control.
I'm playing now blue.
Yeah, that's great. Play Painter, play Maverick. I heard Maverick is struggling. Maybe they need more brains.
No.
More Maverick players. I mean, more people playing Maverick would be great. Maverick is one of the hardest matchups for Upsal spells, to be honest. That's not an exaggeration here. I mean, yeah, they're putting in 12 cards, but what the hell? Have you ever fought against Ferrymakap, Nahil Spellbomb, Gadok Teak, and a Deafening Silence? Well, I have. That's a very shitty feeling on the Uts player side.
Yeah.
And you still won?
No.
Okay.
No.
Good to hear. Would be a great question mark against Brazilians. But yeah, I think it's nice to wrap it up here, boys.
That's what Legacy should look like,